Hey, hi.
Chairs are great. These chairs are great.
Good. Those chairs are brand new.
Wow, these are nice.
Anyway, we're going to get started. So welcome to the Farmer's Wife class. The quilt that we're going to be doing is back here, and it has 63 blocks. There's actually 111 blocks presented in the book, but I'm only doing 63. I'm going to give you a few extras, so if you have a couple that just don't work for you at all, you fuddle with them and you just can't make them work, don't worry about it. You got some more to choose from, okay? So this is how it all started. There was this lady named Lori Hurd who did some research about the Farmer's Wife. And the Farmer's Wife was actually a magazine that was produced in the 1920s and 30s. It was really a rural magazine. And I actually was really excited because I was in an antique store and I found one of these magazines. So be sure after we finish with this lesson, if you want to take a look at it, you should look at it. But in 1922, they decided to run a contest. And what they did, they asked all the farmers, the wives, to write a letter of why they want their daughters to become farmer's wife and not move into the city. And it was a huge contest because the winner actually got $200. The second place got $100. The third place got $50, and the rest of it was kind of distributed between, I think, 100 more people. They got $1 or something like that. So what this Lori did was she took these stories, and they're all listed in this book. And so it's not, I shouldn't say all the stories, but most of the stories are in here. And then she just decided what kind of blocks she wants to do with them. Well, if you look at the instructions in the book, here's just the example of the darting birds. You get a layout of the block, and then you get an indication of what size templates you need to make. These blocks are all made from templates. Remember templates? We don't really do templates, but that's what. So the templates are found on this CD in the back. And if you would go to print out each template, there's only one template per page, so it would be about 500 pages. That's how many different shapes are in there. Well, that's nice, and I did about 2 of those, and then I decided, because I really wanted to make this quilt, I thought, you know what, I'm going to turn it into the Quilt in a Day way. So that's what I did. So we're going to start out with that theory, and I'm going to present 3 blocks this morning. The first one that I'm going to have you start with is going to be the wrench, and the wrench looks like that. Okay, really simple little block. And there's also another block in the book that is exactly the same, but it's called churn dash. So you're really getting 2 for 1 with these instructions, okay? So it's real simple to do. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to start with 2 rectangles, and these are to make our peace triangle squares. So I'm going to put them right sides together, like that. And I just want to draw a line. And I use an Identa pen, but some kind of like sharp, fine point, permanent marking pen I use. And I am just going to draw one line, so I divide it in half. And so I can see that I have 2 squares, okay? Then you can just take your straight edge, and you're going to draw one diagonal line in each one, okay? Very simple. So next I'm going to go over to my machine, and I want to sew 1/4 inch from both sides of that drawn line. And if you want to follow along in your instructions, that would be great. That way I'll know that they're right. I think they're right. I sewed off of them. They appear to work for me. Okay. I think that the light of the machine is off, is it? Oh. Sometimes it's easier for the video if it's dimmed in here. It gets too bright. Okay, so I just have the edge of my 1/4 inch foot just right on that drawn line. I don't worry about the one that goes straight up. I'm just sewing from the diagonally drawn lines. And you can see I have a little piece of fabric hanging out the end there. I call it a jumper fabric, and I think it helps keep your your thread in your needle, and it also helps you not get a big nest of thread underneath. Okay, so I get to the other end, and I'm just going to turn around and go the other way. So I go up the side, and I am going to sew, and you might want to make a note of this, I am going to sew this whole quilt except for maybe 2 blocks with a scant 1/4 inch. You can always trim off, you know, excess fabric, but it's really hard to weave it back on, right? Okay. Snooki, could you plug the iron in for me? I'm kind of going, oh, the iron's not plugged in. Okay, I'm now going to cut on all of the drawn lines. And I'm actually making 4-piece triangle squares at once. You'll see in my instructions I use the word PTS a lot, and that stands for piece triangle squares, in case you wonder what that is.
Oh, sorry. Turn it on.
Okay. See, these guys are good. They're just like multifunctioning, these guys. Okay, so we have a new ruler out that I absolutely, there's kind of a lot of action going on. I actually love this ruler, and I'm going to be squaring up to 2.5. We've had this ruler in larger sizes. We have it in a 6.5, and we have it in 9.5, but this little 4.5 is very convenient. So I am going to put my 2.5-inch line of on the ruler right on the seam line, okay? And then I'm just going to trim off the excess. Okay, that's all you need to do. And you can do it that way while it's closed, or sometimes when I get my patches to be really, really small, I think it's a really good idea to press your seams open. Okay, you're going to press towards your dark so you don't have to worry about that fold making your patch too small. It doesn't look like very much fabric's in there, but it really makes a difference. Okay, the iron's heating up. I thought of it earlier, but things happen, right? It's been so cold in my house that I go over and just iron a lot of things. I finally, last week when it snowed at my house, my husband finally said I could use the heat in the house. We didn't have it on at all last year. In fact, the first 2 years that I lived there, I was convinced that the heater was broken. Needless to say, we have a really low heater bill. Okay, so now I'm going to go back, and you do require an extra step if you do it this way, because you square up one side and then you go back and you square up the other side. And you're cutting off very little. I check and make sure not only is that line right on the seam, but I want this diagonal line to be right at the end of that point as well. Okay, that's going to get you a really good cut. Okay, so there's one.
It's a little hard to see the line because of the fabric.
Because it's kind of busy fabric.
Yeah, it goes along the line.
Oh.
You might just want to say that here, now I got it better at this angle.
Okay, you can see it a little bit better. Here, I'll scoot it back in. You can see that little red line, and I'm just going to scoot it right on top of the seam line.
Perfect.
I put a brand new blade in this morning. You know, sometimes when you have those blades and they're in your cutter for a while, you don't realize how dull it is, and you put a new one, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like a weapon. Okay. All right, and I think this is my last one that I already squared up, but we'll just get rid of those points. Perfect. Okay, so we have 4 of those, so that's how you do those. Pretty clear and easy to do, right? Okay, the next thing we're going to do, the next part we're going to do of our block, we're just going to do these little side pieces. And that's really easy. I'm just going to take 2 strips, like that, and I'm just going to fold them right sides together, do a 1/4 inch seam. Scant, remember? Okay, so I'm going to put my little piece of fabric back in. Okay, when you start making little blocks, it's real important that you really make sure that you have the edges of your fabric lined up. Don't have them kind of thrown in there. Just take the time to really look at them so you're going to get a good even. And you can sew them very quickly. I love this machine that has like every time you stop the foot goes up. You have to get used to it, but it works really good. Okay, so I'm just going to take it over to my iron that I'm sure is hot by now. Set my seam because that's going to sink the seam down into the fabric. And I'm just going to press it open and press towards the dark. Okay? Now I need to have 4 of these pieces. So I'm just going to take my straight edge and I'm going to cut it into 2.5-inch pieces. So there's one. Cut off the edge to make it even. Okay, 1, 2, 3. And I gave you yardage so you have a little bit of extra at each end just to make sure that you got a good even edge. Okay, and this is about all the piecing we need to do for the block. We're going to put a center square in it. And then these pieces that we just made are going to go around the outside edge of that center square. Okay, make sure it's all, the medium's all touching. And then we'll just add in our piece triangle squares. Okay? Pretty easy? Yeah. So I'm just going to show you, the back. I'm confident you guys know how to sew them together. But I did do some pretty detailed instructions. I do want you to press your seam so it always goes away from these corner triangles. It's going to resist, as you're going to get a better press. If you try and press against this, it always wants to fight when you have a lot of bulk. So if you press like that, and I gave you a picture of that as well. Okay? So is that a pretty good way to get started on this quilt? Yeah. 1 down, 62 to go. We're on a roll. Okay, so this is the next block we're going to do. And this is called Railroad. It's also a variation of Jacob's Ladder. It has a whole bunch of different names to it. But today it's called Railroad. And as you can see, it has these piece triangle squares. It's going to be, we're going to make them the same way. But we're adding in these little, we're going to make 5 little 4 patches to go with it. So let's look at our pieces. And I have these 2. Remember, the same size what we did. We're going to do the same thing, put them right sides together. We're going to draw our lines and sew, and we're going to square them up. So I didn't think you needed to see that twice, but there they are. Exactly the same thing as we just did. So you should be confident in that step, right? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is I have 2 longer strips, because you need longer ones since we're making 4 patch. And it's 2 colors. It's a medium and a background. And I'm just going to sew them the same way. Now, when I did my quilt, I did a lot of different backgrounds. It's good to give it a real scrappy look. But if you want a little bit more controlled look to it, you could make all your backgrounds the same. And that would give it kind of some unity to your quilt. But you can go either way. Okay, so we're sewing along, sewing along. I think the thread that I have is pretty linty because I'm getting little red thread fuzz down here. Okay, so when I get to the end, I'm going to take this whole long strip and I'm going to set the seam again and press it to the dark. And press it open. Okay. The iron's good and hot now. Okay. So I'm just going to take it over. I'm going to fold it in half. This is very scientific, no measuring, and I'm just going to cut it in half. But don't put your scissors in the seam. Okay? So the first one I'm going to lay down, I'm going to lay it down so that the dark is going to be going towards me. And then when I lay the next one right sides together, the dark is going to be on top. And when you do that, you can just fold back, and you should look something like a 4-patch. That's how you know that you have them lined up. And I want to do it this way so that the seam on top, when you go to put it in the machine, this is going to be, the one going up is going to be hit the machine first, and it's going to kind of push this down in, and you're going to get a really good match on your 4-patch. Okay? So I'm going to turn this towards me so I can cut it. And how many do I need? I think I need 5 of these. Okay, so I'm going to clean up my edge, and then every time I make a cut, that's going to be for one 4-patch. Boy, to have a new mat and a new blade is like too much. Well, they say you should do that, you know. Because if you have a bad mat and you put a new blade in, it just kills your blade really fast because you're really pushing down on it. And if you have a bad blade and a new mat, you're going to get a bad mat because you're pushing down on it too hard. So it all goes together. Okay. So I'm just going to sew down there. And you can just assembly slide and sew them one after the other. See how nicely they are just ready to go because you don't have to like fold them back. So it's real important that you do cut them as a pair. And then you don't risk the possibility of sewing the wrong way, right? Light to light and dark to dark instead of the 4-patch look. Okay. Now the next trick we're going to do, and I'm keeping all these little extra pieces that are worth anything at all. Keep those because we'll do something with those later. I have little projects planned throughout once we get going. We have to have fun. Okay, so you see there's little red seams that go up here. It's between the horizontal, and it goes between the horizontal seam out to the edge of your fabric. And there's on this side. When I take this patch, and you'll notice that the seam on the top is going this way, and this is going this way. I want all my seams to go in a circular motion. Now, this one happens to be going in a clockwise motion, but sometimes in some of the pieces we'll get to, it will go counterclockwise due to lining up to something, you know, that we're sewing to have that seam lock. But all I need to do is you don't even have to seam ripper it out. You just push this one to this side and this one to this side, and it just pops right on out, okay? And you get a little 4-patch right in the middle there. And what that does, it really reduces that bulk in the middle of your patch. Okay, so you're going to do that for all 5. And I am going to take it over to the mat and iron it as well. Okay. There goes my stomach. You probably heard it on the mic.
You could have said it was iron.
Oh, there goes my iron. All right. Okay. Now this is probably the most challenging part of this block, and that is to make sure that you have your patches going in the right direction. So I like to lay out my piece triangle squares first, and I'm making sure that the lights are in the middle, okay? The next thing, I can see that I have a chain going right down the middle of my block. So it'll look like that. And then I have 2 remaining ones. And the way that this one's done, it goes like that. If you want to change your look, you can make them go in the same direction. There's no rule about that. But I don't suggest doing one way and one the other. That will look like a mistake. Okay? But that kind of adds fun if it goes a different way, huh? So there's your block. And then you look at your picture, and then you sew it together. Look at your picture, look at your patches, and then sew it. Okay? And let me just show you what the back of that block looks like. You can see where I have all my little 4 patches where I twisted them out, swirled the seams. You can just, it's really basic. I just pressed everything towards the corners and towards the middle, so it's like towards all the 4 patches. And I believe you have pictures of that in your instructions. I like to take pictures of the backs because I always want, am I doing it right? So if I have a picture, I feel better about it.
Great.
Okay, so we have one more. This one's called Mother's Dream, and it's a real simple one to do as well. I wanted to get you guys going on the simple ones before we really dive in. Okay, as in the other 2 blocks, we're going to be sewing long strips together, and then once they are sewn together, we're going to cut them. And we're going to cut them into 4 equal pieces. So I didn't think you need to watch me sew strips together again. Not with your scissors. We're going to cut them, trim off the edge just to make sure it's good and even. Okay.
2 5/8.
2 5/8.
5/8.
Yeah, don't you love that measurement?
No.
Most of the measurements are pretty clear in this quilt. Every once in a while we'll get a strange one, but I tried to keep it clean for you. Okay, so I just have 2 little bits at the end. We're going to get rid of those. And we're just going to place those around a center patch, which I don't have. But visualize that center patch. It's blue. Okay. Now I picked this stripe fabric, it's like a stripe background, and I picked it for a reason, just to prove to you that it can work in this patch. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my 4 sides, and all I do is I'm going to cut this one in 2 diagonals. Now whenever you have things on point, like if you have put your blocks on point, and you're doing like your side rectangles, your set rectangles, you always want to start with a square. My ruler seems to be static. Start with a square and cut it on 2 diagonals. And the reason being is because you want, like if before it was cut, this is bias in here, right? And you don't want bias at the outside of your block. So when I take it over to here, I'm actually putting the bias inside my block. And then I'm keeping my stable edges on the outside. Okay? So we got that. And then for the corners, whenever you do corners, you want to do your corners and only cut on 1 diagonal because the bias is going to be here. Okay? If you do choose to use a striped fabric though, you need to make sure you cut one of them in one direction, okay, like from that way, and the other one is going to go in the other direction. I can hear that iron again. Okay, so I'm just looking and see, I just took this 1 square and it's going to go to opposite sides of my block, and I'm going to take my other square and it's going to opposite sides, and you can see how that stripe continues to go in the right direction. You could be really fussy and actually line it up, but as you see when it's sewn, it looks fine. Okay, so that's kind of like a little lesson on using stripes. I like to know how stripes work, you know, in the block. So there you go. So that's how you do that. And we'll take a look at the back just for pressing. Very easy pressing. We're going to be pressing towards all those triangles and towards that middle piece. Okay? What I did at the end, I had like little bits kind of hanging out. I made these a little bit oversized. So I took a 6.5-inch fussy cut ruler. And if you have one of these, you might want to put these in your supplies for this class, because there'll be several blocks that's really good just to trim it up like that. And you'll notice, I don't know if you can get close on this, but if you look at this corner, there is actually a 1/4 inch indication of where your seam's going to be. So you can make sure when you trim it up that you're going to get a really good match at that corner. Okay, so it's really a useful thing. So that's the hint on that. All right, you guys ready to go start sewing?
Oh, can we talk about fabric?
Yes, we can talk about fabric. When we do fabric, you're going to use mostly lights and darks, because when you do these little blocks, you need to have contrast between your blocks, or you won't be able to, you're going to make all this beautiful piecing and you won't be able to see it. So I would say if you're going to do a really scrappy quilt like that, I mean that one's really, really scrappy, but I would have at least 20 different darks and 20 different lights. And in there you're going to have some mediums. I would say like 5 to 10 mediums. And one medium that I really think you should get is something that you can do a 2.5-inch fussy cut on. So let me see if I can find one, real easy. Oh, where's my block that I'm looking for? Okay, right here. Can you see how this has this really nice fussy cut right here with the medium? So look around for one of those. And if you're lucky enough, if you can find a fussy cut for a 1-inch finished square, that works really nice as well. And as far as background, if you're doing like all one background, you're going to need at least 3.5 yards of background. You use up a lot of background because although that quilt's not that big, there's a lot behind that quilt in seam allowances. I mean, when you look at the back, it's so much more than when you do big blocks. You know, when we just look at this, how much seam is underneath there, proportionate to the block. So that would get you started. And once you get going scrappy, you can always add to your stash, but that'll be a good way to get started. And kind of pick a variety of colors, you know, like reds and blues and greens with your backgrounds, okay? And try and stay away from really busy backgrounds if you're going scrappy, okay? I like the texture of some print in it, but I would stay away from a little bit. All right, any other questions?
So on the finished quilt, those are 6.5-inch blocks, but then you've added corner and set them up. Can you talk about how that layout?
Yeah, I wanted to do this layout because I wanted to make sure no matter, I'm not saying that your blocks aren't going to be 6-inch finished, but mine weren't all 6-inch finished. As much as we try, we do our best. But I wanted to sew these triangles on all 4 sides so I can square each block up to the same size. So no matter what kind of fun you have with your blocks, it'll work and your quilt will be flat in the end. There's some other traditionals. In fact, in your Farmer's Wife book, there's, it does like with lattice and cornerstones. You know, so there's other ways to do it, which is fun as well. But this was just a way, no matter what you did, you can still get your quilt done. Okay, and I have yardage for that as well. I don't have it with me today, but that's all planned out. And then I just wanted to do something in the border. I wanted to carry out that little piecing in the border, so that's why those geese are out there. Okay?
So could you point out some of the blocks, if you chose the same background fabric, which fabric would that be in some of the different blocks?
Okay, so like it would be this fabric, and this fabric, and this. This is really close. But see, some of them, like this one, this is like almost like a light medium type of fabric, okay? And I would probably do that a little bit lighter next time around because I did a lot of piecing there. I want to see that piecing, right? So think about the smaller the patches in the block, the more contrast you want in that block.
So if you were going to use a similar background in that block, would that be the background fabric? Or
That would be my background.
that would be the background?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in the block between the pink and the green, that has a bluish color, would that have been the background color?
Pink and the green.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yes.
This one?
One over, one to your right, yes.
Okay.
Would there be a background fabric there?
There is no background.
There's
It's
no
just,
background.
there's no background. And sometimes we just put those in because think about people using their scraps. They didn't always have background. So that's why I put some of these no backgrounds in, just to add interest to it. Yeah, and like some of them, like you don't think there's like, when you compare like the piecing to this block as compared to the piecing in this block, this one looks like so big, right? But you need to have that variety because if you had everything look like that, it would look like all muddled together. So you need to have like just a complete variety of things going on, I think, to make it work. And some of the blocks, to be honest with you, some blocks you're going to make and you're kind of go, oh, I want a different contrast on it. I mean, I did it, and so you just remake them, right? And you can put them on the back, right?
Perfect.
All right, that was good questions. Okay? I think we're ready.
I would say when you're gonna shoot the next one. Do you know when it is?
My next one, February 5th. And we can post those dates on our website. All right.
See you soon.
Bye. Thank you.